All right, students. Welcome back to the Cisco Packet Tracer Introduction course. Again, my name is Keith Gebhardt. So in the last lecture, we really got to become familiar with the GUI within Cisco Packet Tracer. We saw some of the different areas that we can navigate to, where to navigate for certain features in the application. But let's start putting it to more of a practical use. We need to talk about working in this workspace here. This is where, a majority of everything we do will be taking place. This is where we build our network, topologies. This is where we simulate our networks. So let's dive into that. The first thing I want to cover is how do we actually get devices into this section? Well, that's quite simple. We could go down here to any of the network devices. Obviously, we're already in it by default. And then if I just go to routers, if I click switches or hubs or anything else, it's going to take me into all these extra devices. We're going to start off with switches, okay? So let's just go ahead and pull a couple 2960 switches. Now, the way I'm doing this is I'm just clicking and dragging it in and then letting go. Now there's another way we could do this as well. We could also just click it once, put our mouse wherever we want in the topology, and click again and it drops it. Pretty cool stuff. Now I don't know if you caught that real quick or not. You notice if I hover over a device, it kind of gives me a brief summary of what's going on the device itself. Practical, maybe sometimes, it's quick reference, but typically when we're studying and we're trying to learn this information, we want to be going inside of the device using show commands because you're not going to have this feature on your exams or in the real world, essentially. So you need to know how to find this information using the actual command line interface for Cisco devices. Now, we could also pull in a couple routers. Again, click routers. We could say, let's use some 2811 routers all the way over here on the right. Grab one. We could click it, place it there. Or again, my preferred method is just click it and drag it up. That way you could actually see the icon where you're actually dropping it. Pretty cool stuff. Now, one thing that's bugging me a little bit is right now the only information we're getting from all of these is the actual model number of these devices. What if we want to add some more descriptive, information to these devices just to help, give us more information about them? When we're creating network documentation in the real world or in a lab, we want to be as descriptive as possible. Just makes our lives a lot easier. There's something that we need to do to get some names enabled for these devices. And to do this, let's go ahead and go to Options, Preferences, and that's going to open up the Preferences dialog box again, right? And if you go down here to Show Device Name Labels and click that little icon, you can see all these new device names have populated. Go ahead and close that out. And if we wanted to, we could go ahead and click that name, highlight it, and say switch left. Okay, we could say switch right. And the reason why I'm only naming two of those is because we're going to go ahead and remove the rest of these here in a moment. To actually play within these devices, we just click them, and you'll notice it pops up a physical module. It's showing you a picture of the interface of what it would really look like. You could zoom in, you could zoom out, original size, etc., etc. You could click config. You're going to see this is kind of what you would see if you were to web GUI into a real Cisco switch. This is kind of how it would be. You would have a bunch of different things like this you could click on for interfaces, easy configurations, but it's also giving you the equivalent of what the actual iOS commands would be. This is going to be more aimed for you guys at the CompTia Network Plus level. If you're going for your Cisco certifications, you will need to forget about this and go right into the CLI, which is your command line interface. That's it right there. Now, attributes you hardly ever will pay attention to when you're studying. You might maybe occasionally for some more advanced stuff dive into that, but really we don't really pay too much mind to that. Now with a router or any kind of modular device, if I click that, you're going to see a couple different things here. Because a modular router, we could add different modules to it. For example, an HWIC2T card is a serial connection that is acting as our CSU DSU to connect to a service provider, for example. Well, if I click that and try to drop it in, so you notice I'm clicking it and just holding my mouse button and dragging it. If I unclick it, cannot add module when the power is on. So this is quite realistic because in real life you would not be doing this hot swapping. You would actually need to turn the device off. So if I zoom in, scroll over, you will see there is a power button. If I toggle that off, now I try to bring that HWIC2T card over, it allows it. Now I just turn it back on and it's going to register the hardware and software implemented on the chipset on that module into the router's iOS. It's going to recognize it. That's part of the boot sequence for that router. But that's totally for another topic. So that's how you would do that. And again, you can configure it from here, which I don't recommend any of you Cisco seekers out there. You want to be right here at the CLI, and we'll dive into that a little bit more through this course. Not too much, but enough just to get you acquainted with it. We could go ahead and close that out. Another thing I want to bring to your attention as well is if we are trying to connect these devices. Okay, so we're really only going to pay mind to connecting switch left to switch right. And to do that, we go down here to the connections icon, which is the lightning bolt. And you're going to notice a bunch of different connection types here. So this is where you need to start learning your connection types. By the way, for both your Network Plus and your Cisco exams, you need to know these. You need to know the difference between what a console cable is or rollover cable. You need to know what a difference between a straight through, crossover, a phone port, fiber, DTE, DCE cables, coaxial cables, phone line, you know, your standard like electronics cable, this brown one here, it's going to say IOE for Internet of Everything custom cable, and then down here's a USB cable. But this guy right here, notice if I click this and just connect the router to a switch, it automatically does it. Well, let's go ahead and hit the X button. That is going to delete this cable. If I hover over it and click, go back to my mouse pointer, that is not good because it's automatically going to choose the correct cable for you. We do not want that. What we need to do to fix that is go ahead and go into Options, Preferences, and Disable Auto Cable. So if I click X now and try to use the auto cable, it's disabled. That just kind of helps prevent you from taking the easy way out because you're not going to learn anything doing it that way. Again, let's go ahead and take another cable. I'm just going to use a straight through cable here just for demonstration purposes only. You're going to notice it connects and I'm getting amber lights. Now you notice when I connected the router to the switch that I was getting a red light, and that's because there's two small things with Cisco that you need to understand. Routers, by default, need port configurations to work. Switches, by default, do not need port configurations to work. Just remember those two things and you'll be golden. I could buy a brand new Cisco switch, take it right out of the box, plug it in, connect things to it, and they will communicate at a layer 2 level, which is your switching pretty much, right? Routers, on the other hand, which are layer 3, need to be told to turn on or off the interfaces to connect to another device. Just be wary of that in case you're wondering why your link status lights are red, meaning they're not up. We're going to hit the X button, delete that, because we're not concerned about that. But here, you know, we plug these two in. Now, we don't really know what ports these are configured on. Now, for training, it might be a little bit easier at first, at least, to go back into Options, Preferences, and if I click this Always Show Port Labels, okay, you'll notice now I have the interfaces which indeed these cables are plugged into. Again, at first, this is extremely helpful just to help get you more familiar with building the topologies and working on labs. But as you get more comfortable within the application and some of your command line interfaces, you want to remove that because you're not going to have things like that in your exam. You're going to want to be able to figure out that information by using your show commands. Essentially, a show command in Cisco is a verification command. So it's going to give you this information without visually seeing it in an application like this, because we don't have applications like this in the real world for the most part. There are a few out there, but most companies rather, don't have the budget to buy the licensing for those extremely advanced applications. So for now, we could leave it on, and that's only going to benefit you. So we could go ahead and close that out. This is awesome. So we already have two devices connected. We were able to figure out how to name them, and everything looks good. Now, what if I want to delete devices? Well, there's a couple ways we could do this. I could click and drag my pointer arrow, and you're seeing it's giving me a box with, you know, little dots, or I wouldn't say they're marching ants, but you get the idea. And you notice they go from that dark blue to a light blue when it's selected. Dark blue, light blue. So I could select just a few. I could even click and move those two objects at the same time, or I could click and move one by itself. But if I want to click and delete multiple items, I just highlight them like that, click the X, and it's going to ask me if I want to delete both selected items, and it's telling me how many were selected. I could click yes. But pay attention to the cursor I currently have. It is indeed that X. So if I thought I was back at my pointer and I wanted to click the switch to go make a configuration, oops, it deleted it. So if you want, you could always go back and hit undo this arrow or a Control Z in Windows, and it brings it back. But it's good habit when you make a deletion in your project, make sure you go back and click that arrow so you just help avoid accidents. This redo or undo button, by the way, only works so many times. So if you deleted quite a few things and you're like, oh man, I didn't mean to do that, well, it's not going to work. Another reason why we always save our projects, and we're going to talk more about like a workflow setup, like good habits, in the next lecture or two. Now, if I just want to delete the one object, I could just click the X, click it, but again, just make sure you go back to your arrow. Now, when I made this note here, okay, one thing to pay attention to with these notes is if I click a note here, it's going to give me a text box, and this text box will make your text while you are typing. I'm trying to type and talk here. It doesn't work out well. While you are typing, look pretty darn good, doesn't it? I'm going to hit the Enter key to indent it to a new line. Now, if I keep typing, it will still indent for me, but what will it really look like? Now, I'm doing this deliberately so you can see. To get out of this text box, I'm just going to take that indent cursor, whatever it's called, click, and look at that. It just kept going and going and going. It only indented when I told it to by hitting the Enter key. Just keep that in mind, because if I'm typing a whole bunch of things here and see how it just keeps, it's staying nice and compact in that box, but, here, let's even go a little further. It looks real good. I like it how it's nice and slimmed down and compact like that. Maybe I'd want to put it on the side or something. But as soon as I get out of that, it just keeps going and going and going all the way across your screen. You know a text box is selected, by the way, when it's red, okay? If you highlight it like this, it's selected, then I can click and move it. If you just click in it once like this, that's how you edit it. Notice if I'm back here at my cursor and I try to click inside that text box, it will not edit it for me. It just creates a new text box. So with these, I could go ahead and delete them. Now, do you want to delete selected items? Well, right here, just by looking at this, I don't know what's selected. So I'm going to say no and just use this X. I don't want this. This is all garbage. This is garbage, but this is useful information. So I'll keep this on the screen a little bit more. Maybe put it over there on the side out of the way. Maybe I want to move these over here a little bit, just keep them out of the way, what have you. That's how you would do that. Nice, simple, and easy. Now there are these little circles and squares. Now I'll highlight these, move them back, maybe spread this out a little bit. I use these for when I'm talking about different collision domains, broadcast domains, or even if I'm discussing trunks, and different VLANs, okay, communicating through different trunks or what have you. I could take this, you could use a polygon, which is like a freehand shape, which honestly, I never use this thing. I think it's ugly. It doesn't do anything good for me. Click in there, delete it. Circles you could use, squares you could use, whatever you fancy, really. If you want a fill color, you go from no fill to fill. Obviously, you could change the fill color, let's say like a green, and maybe this is network A. And then if I want to draw something for maybe a network B, I could come over here and, you could get creative with it. You could use these for whatever you want. As a student, I don't see you having too much use for this. It helps me when I'm teaching just to really isolate so you guys can visually see different things like that. But if you are going to use this as a student, that's how you do it. I mean, it doesn't hurt. You do have those resources available at your own disposal if you choose to do so. And obviously, if you want to change the outline color, you would do it the same way. So we could go ahead and close that. If I do want to actually delete these, again, just click the X, click, and bada bing, bada boom, it is gone. So right there is how we actually start working in our workspace. Now, I didn't go through on how to save the files or anything like that. We didn't really go into any real serious configurations because we're going to start building configurations as we move forward in this course, and we will start diving into some more of that information as we move forward. All right, guys, so I will see you in the next one.